Today's episode, I want to give you a little bit of a background of my story and how I got into this art world in the first place and how I really came from where I was to where I'm at right now. So, as you might know, this is a really windy story, as anyone's is usually. Mine has spanned my entire life. I'm in my mid 50s, so that tells you how long I've been at this art game. So I've always wanted to be an artist. And if you don't know me, my name is Michele Luminato. I am an artist, I am a mentor and a podcast host. And as a young person, all I ever wanted was to be an artist. I didn't always know how to describe it. I just knew I loved creating, and I knew that that was where I felt most at home, most safe in the way that I showed up in the world. And back in the 90s, when I was making decisions about my adulthood, what am I going to do with my life? How to make a living as an artist was a bit of a mystery to anyone that I knew personally, and it was really unknown. In fact, it was discouraged by most adults in my life, and I don't think they probably knew how discouraging it was, but I think that no one really knew the path. And the belief was that the life as an artist was about struggling, being poor, and maybe crazy, and only the lucky ones really succeeded. So I think with that mindset of you had to be a lucky one, that was definitely a mindset that I had going into it. So after floundering after high school for a while, like many young, eager artists, I entered the world of fine art school to find the answers where creativity flourished immensely, but business savvy was really scarce. In fact, I have so many lessons I learned from art school. I have an episode on my most valuable art school lessons, so check that out. So during art school, I decided I'll choose the path of a graphic designer because that's probably the best pathway to pay my bills. That seemed like the logical, sensible thing to do. And as a twist of fate led me to Nike along the way, where I learned the art of product creation and successful marketing. And so went into art school, came out of it with a design degree, probably thought I was going to be a graphic designer, and ended up in product creation. I was working in the creation of selling products, and I literally used to ask myself, how did I end up here? Why am I even here? How am I working on shoes in particular? What is happening here? So during my time at Nike, I was skill stacking, and I didn't really understand how valuable those skills were. But I was tasked with creating a job that had never existed before. And without going into all the detail on that, I'll just tell you that I developed a system for a product creation process, a process of looking at a certain aspect of the product that really became an important part of the company. And I became really proficient at it. And then I ended up teaching that system to other people who then took the job on. So I was able to move from learning something to developing something to teaching others and teaching them how to do what I did. And it became important, and it's still something that the company uses today. And I learned how to craft color stories, understanding how to use market trends effectively to sell thousands of successful products to the right fit audience. So I learned a ton about an audience and who was going to get what products and what would make sense for everyone. And that got down to the minutia of what things work globally, what things work specifically in a region, what things work in like literally a suburb of an area versus another suburb. Like we got really, really minutia. And so that really helped me understand the nuances that go into right audience fit and what is really effective for matching products to right fit audiences. So I was skill stacking in a way that I didn't know how I was going to use down the road. But I just kind of stayed with it, and it was a really great experience. And I learned what worked, and I also learned what didn't work. And through that experience, which turned out to be a bit of a journey, I was there for quite a while, I had this burning question because I knew that that wasn't my permanent path, although I had a really great experience. I wanted to know, was it possible to apply what I learned at Nike to my own art? Could I do it for myself? And is this something that would work for me? And so, of course, again, I'm shortening the story because otherwise I would have to spend a whole day doing 8 episodes just on my story because there's so many little pockets and twists to it. But eventually, I decided to test my knowledge and I applied those skills to my own art for the first time by creating a boutique stationery company. This felt like a really natural, easy path to the least resistant way to go at that time because remember, I was a designer and that was what I knew. And so I started this with my then boyfriend who ended up becoming my husband. And I just had a dream. I was like, what if we could create a card company? What if I could just put my designs on cards? That would be really cool. I would love to do that. So we began by just literally making 15 cards in my New York City apartment. So it was a very much winging it kind of experience. And in the beginning, my creativity was flowing and it was making something completely unique into the market. And I really was diving into who I am, what I wanted to create, and how I could be unique in the market. And we literally just went into it. And I laugh now because 15 cards is not how to start a stationery company. If you're interested in that, that's going to be a whole separate episode. But there's a lot of lessons that I learned here. But we instantly became successful and it caught me by surprise. There's a lot to that story of why it worked, but it worked. And so I was really excited because I thought that this was the thing, this is what I'm going to do. And then over time, I felt like a machine. And again, when you're selling cards and you know how inexpensive cards are, you have to sell a lot of cards to make a really good income as a business who makes cards and stationery products. So we became so much like a machine, producing work so quickly that I couldn't find true inspiration. I literally was just working way too fast, trying to keep up with the machine, so to speak. And I started looking at what other companies were doing, and I started blending in with the masses, meaning my point of view became much more watered down than my original point of view, and I stopped listening to myself as a trusted source. And it was a really, really big lesson. Actually, there's so many micro lessons in this business story. In spite of growing to 600 retail stores, I was burnt out and it was showing. And I just didn't know the answers anymore. And I wanted out. I had a calling for making art, but this wasn't it. And at that time, I just could not see a path out. Now, I really know there's a lot here to the story that I'll probably do episodes just talking about some of these key lessons. And so, long story short, we ended up closing that business down and going in a different direction. I floundered for a while after this because I really was searching for who am I? What am I about? I was so burnt out that I couldn't put a pencil to paper for over a year and I thought I was done creatively. I literally just thought, that's it. I'm never going to create anything ever again. And I wasn't sure if I was ever going to make art again. That's how burnt out I was. And I floundered while I was designing wallpaper and things weren't working right. It just didn't feel right. And then insert small kids into the picture because we started a family and life felt like I was all over the place. I just did not have a sense of who I was. So I call this period my flounder period. It was a really great time when I started raising kids, but I didn't know myself yet as an artist. And then a tragedy happened in 2014, which really shook my world. My dad suddenly passed away. It was not something that we expected. And I just was shook to the core by this. And so what happened for me is, as you know, I was literally just floundering, doing all sorts of things. I started going into my garage on a Friday night, pulling out any paper I could find, screen printing inks, kids' paints, like whatever I could find. And I started making messes with a glass of wine and tears streaming down my face because I was just grieving and I wanted to feel close to him. And I thought, well, he was a painter. Maybe I can feel connected to him. I wasn't meant to be the painter. He was. If I do some painting, like that's all I wanted at that moment. And I can't really call them paintings. I mean, they were mostly messes. And there was something that happened through that process, though. It really opened up my heart in a way that I did not expect. It was that window, that portal to finding myself that I did not plan on having. I wanted it, but that was an unexpected opening. And I began to heal in many, many ways just through letting out my raw emotions and only trying to satisfy myself in that moment. And if you want to see these in video, check out the YouTube video on this episode because I'm showing you actual pictures of the work and what I went through. And through this process, it felt so good. It felt so good. A light bulb switched on and I knew that this was what I was meant to do with my life. Like it felt to the core like, oh, this is what lights me up. So I invested more time in painting on Friday nights, and those Friday nights turned into a few hours a week. And I started sneaking off to paint in pure bliss regularly, but I sucked, and I sucked really, really bad. Again, on YouTube, I'm showing you pictures. It was really pretty rough starts. But I was blissfully struggling. That bliss, that like, oh my gosh, this is great. This is going to be good. I'm going to be an artist. That quickly turned to struggle because as any good artist story goes, the reality of the struggle set in. And once I made that decision, oh, this is it, that bliss turned into, how am I going to make this happen? That was literally like all the things that I kept thinking about. Okay, now how am I going to do this? But I was really ambitious and I was blindsided by my newfound love of painting. And I bought the biggest canvas I could fit into the door. And I decided to start there. And I laughed thinking, crazy, you sucked and you bought a big canvas and you thought that that was going to solve the problem. That is funny. Looking back on that, oh well. Anyway, so I bought a big canvas and I thought, let's go. But I floundered, and you might relate to what I'm about to share next, which is I had a massive roller coaster few years of painting struggles. And at first, I lacked a lot of faith in myself. I did not truly understand what I wanted to paint, and I was confused and I was overwhelmed by the endless possibilities. And that really took a big chunk of time navigating that confusion. And I found myself scrolling through Instagram, as you do, and looking for inspiration and success stories. And I was just lost. I was still lost. And I would find myself jumping from one idea to another and creating art that just didn't really resonate with my true self. Like there was something off about it. And many of my paintings sold through this curvy few years. But I often found myself discounting them or haggling with buyers, and I was really undervaluing my work, and I was selling it for less than it deserved. I mean, it still sucked, but it was definitely even undersold from what it was worth. And I realized I was in a market that didn't align with my aspirations. I wanted my work to be better, and I wanted to attract better collectors, people who really appreciated art, as opposed to just have something to fill their wall. And I hit a low point after a really disappointing exhibition experience. And I'm sure I'm not the only artist to say this because there's exhibitions we do, and sometimes they turn out to be really hard learning points. This was one of them. And I made a bunch of work. I won't go into all the details about the disappointment of this exhibition, but basically, I wasn't really proud of the work that I had done. And I felt really gutted by that and felt disappointed in myself because I had made so many compromises of making the kids walk home from school in the rain because I was in the studio trying to crank it out for this exhibition. And in the end, I was like, what is this? This isn't even stuff I'm proud of. I don't even want to sell this. And so that led to, of course, discounting the work and not wanting to sell it and blah, blah, blah. But during that struggle, I asked myself a really pivotal question. And I literally just stopped and was like, wait a minute, what am I doing here? Stop, Michelle, stop the madness. How can I create and sell my most authentic work? How do I actually do that? Work that I really love and that I'm really proud of. And I literally asked myself, do I get a master's? Is that something that I should do? And I was like, no, that's not the right answer. I mean, that is an answer, but that's not the right answer. And then I was like, wait, I think I already know how to do this. I already know the answers. And the answers really were found by merging my art school processes with Nike's business acumen. Like that was this fusion that really then also became the heart of what we have in Origin Art today. And I want to share this with you because I really want to inspire you that if you feel like you have had these confusing times in your painting journey, that it's pretty typical, even with people who have experience with art school or business, to go through these realignments. I like to look at them really as a realignment. And I know that based on me asking that really powerful question, I have come out stronger on the other side. And what I did during that time was I literally was like, slow down to speed up. That was my motto. And that's when I decided to step back and create a process that would allow me to discover my most authentic voice as an artist. And that was the birth of my inspiration to creation process, which is what we use today in Origin Art. And I went from my original ugly paintings all the way to what I'm doing now. And that process literally changed the game for me. I can't even express how much that slowing down to speed up and reinterpreting that process over and over and over again has changed what I do. So the answers were already within. For me, what worked was I developed a process. And again, that process is the foundation of the Origin Art framework that I teach now. And I implemented strategies to source my truest inspiration and make my most authentic work and build my brand around transformative decisions for sustainable growth. And I say for sustainable growth because I really think that there is two paths. There is a quick-sighted short-term decision, and then there is the sustainable growth long-term vision. And when I decided to focus on sustainable growth, the long-term vision versus the short-term, that was a game changer as well. And so that was a really big shift for me on what is it that I actually want to do. And this thinking and this process led me to tripling my prices, finally selling at prices that I used to dream of, even during economic challenging times and times where you're like, that shouldn't be happening, but it was. And, a painting that I used to struggle to sell for $65, I could then literally turn and sell for $1,000. So that shift has been, tenfold. That's not even tripling my prices. In some cases, it's way more. And the other thing was I was able to finally create unique artwork that stood out in a really crowded market. And there's a lot of competition. There always will be, but creating unique work has given me much more confidence in what I'm creating and really making work that I'm genuinely proud of. And that shift has made me feel much more excited about sharing it and promoting it and really putting it out there in the world. And the other thing that happened that was something that I'm really happy and almost more excited about is that it's really establishing this continuous flow of art ideas that's going to serve me for years, if not decades. I have ideas already that I want to work on 2 to 3 years down the road. So that is something that I never had access to when I started painting. I was all over the place, and really things changed for me in a way that I am super grateful for. So I wanted to share this with you because I've had key mentors in my life that really made the big difference. And I wanted to be able to do that for other artists as well. And one of the things that I always encourage artists to do is you've got to look at your own authentic strengths. And me helping other artists is one of those things. I love supporting artists. That's just something that I want to do. And for me not to do that is feeling like there's a missing piece to really being my truest self. So this podcast and Origin Art has become a platform for artists to discover their true voices and bring their art to market just as I did. And here's another little side note to that is that I always wanted to help my dad sell his authentic paintings. And I never had a chance to do that. It was just cut too short. We were literally just working on getting his website going. And I was really going to work through all of the things that I'm talking about on this podcast. And this is my way of still honoring him. And I'll definitely share more on that story later. But I do feel really compelled to help other artists because I don't want anyone to feel like they didn't really get to do the thing they wanted to do. So if I can go from my ugly messes, and I'm telling you, I have way uglier messes than you've ever done, to creating the work that I do today, it is truly possible for anyone. And I want to share so much more with you at a deeper level on everything that I just shared. But that's my story, and that's a wrap for today. So stay tuned for more episodes as we get into the nitty-gritties on more of these. And if there's one area in this episode that you were like, hey, I would love to hear more about this, send me a DM on Instagram at Origin Art with Michele and let me know what you want to hear more of. I would love to know. Stay tuned for more episodes and follow the podcast for new updates. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share with others and tag me on Instagram at originart_with_Michele. You can also find a video version on YouTube at Michele Luminato Studio. We have a lot to talk about, and my goal is to share my story and the story of others to empower you to make sellable art that feels like you. Tap the follow button, and if you're feeling super excited about what you're hearing on this podcast, please rate and review on Apple Podcast. It would mean the world to me.